Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Miss Friesdat. She's a thought leader, journalist, and a filmmaker. She co-founder and runs two nonprofits to improve and raise confidence in U.S. elections. She's contributed to Emmy Award-winning coverage at ABC News and produced election security investigations that received over 4 million views. She's been both quoted and featured in the New York Times, and her journalism and advocacy work have been featured in the Washington Post, The Hill, The Political, Salon, the MSN.com, The Young Turks, throughout City and State, New York Focus, and the Albany Times Union. She had assignments with NBC, MSN, NBC, CNBC, CBS, Fox News channels, and The Nightlight. Her first documentary, Hollerback Not Voting in an American Town, was featured in the Hollywood Reporter as part of a group of thoughtful and provocative films being made by women. Wow, that's a lot of things going on there. So definitely, you got to tell me more about that. Before I dive into that, though, tell me a little bit about your upbringing and your background. Where are you originally from?
I was born in Pueblo, Colorado. It's a small town in the south of Colorado, kind of like the industrial, people call it like the armpit of Colorado. It's like, there's like the beautiful Rocky Mountains
Yeah.
and then Pueblo is more kind of like an industrial working town. But I grew up there for a few years and then we moved around a little bit. I eventually wound up out in California because my parents split up and I grew up in Northern California. And I think what was most probably important about my upbringing was that my parents left me alone a lot. Like you might think
Mhm.
that's a bad thing. And I think sometimes I did feel like, like they're not really here helping me out. But one thing that it really taught me was like how to figure things out for myself and
Yeah.
how to survive and how to like really solve problems by myself. So like I'll give you an example of that. My dad was a doctor and I went to live with him and he was in residency at the hospital there and he was at the hospital all the time, like day and night, and I was pretty much on my own. And one time I burned my hand pretty bad. Like I burned my thumb, I think, on like a hot pot or something, and it was bubbling up and it hurt like crazy. And I called my dad and I was like, I'm burned, I'm burned. I'm like, I'm hurt. Can you come home? And he was like, no, I can't. Like, I'm here at the hospital and they need me. He was like, just like put your hand under the cold water on the faucet and call one of the other doctors on the block if you need help. And I was like, okay. And I was upset, but I did that. I put my hand under the cold water. And then after a while, I thought about it and I was like, oh, I think there's ice in the freezer. If I put some ice on my thumb, I
Mhm.
could like not have to stay under the sink. I could put some ice on my thumb and walk around. And so I was like, okay, I got some ice, and then eventually stopped hurting and it was okay. And it seems kind of like traumatic and maybe it's a little like tough love kind of thing. But what happened, I think, over and like, I mean, that happened to me just like constantly as I was growing
Mhm.
up. I had to figure things out for myself and do things myself. And so when something happens and I need to do something for myself, I'm not afraid. I
Mhm.
just figure it out. So like right now, I want you to play that video that we made It's a celebrity video to try to inform the public about what's happening here in New York with our elections. And we weren't getting the attention of the senators and the assembly members in the legislature, and they were ignoring our bill. And I was like, we need to get their attention. What are we going to do? So I'm actually a video editor. I know how to edit video. I know how to produce. I did that for years with network television. And I was like, we're going to produce a celebrity ad. So I talked to a friend of mine, Andre Brower, who's a wonderful actor. And I was like, this is really important. Would you do this? And he was like, yeah, let me do it. And so we recorded him and another really powerful advocate in New York, Laurie Daniel Favors, who's the executive director of the Center for Law and Social Justice. And we produced this ad, and it was really powerful. And it got 400,000 views online. And the Senate passed our bill overnight, like that.
Yeah.
So it's just like I think we as people, we feel like, oh, other people are going to do this for us. Like someone else has to like solve these big problems. It's us. Like we are the ones we've been waiting for. And we have to figure out how to do these things for ourselves and make things happen. So, and I think kind of like when I was growing up, that lesson really was taught to me in a very kind of like deep, profound way.
Yeah, no, and you know what? That's actually definitely huge. When you think about that and the way you position that, and based on your experience, again, growing up and having to do that yourself, you tend to bring things from your past or how your upbringing might be to the future, right? And so let's talk about that for a second. I mean, obviously, you're very involved in some in the political aspect or being an advocate of that. At which point growing up did you decided that this is what you wanted to do?
I mean, I went through a lot of things. So I, I I haven't been like an advocate since
Hmm.
that long, maybe about 4 years. I co-founded these nonprofits about 4 years ago. So when I was growing up, my mom was very political, and she was always like at the grocery store getting people to sign petitions like against the Vietnam War. I remember when I was like 7 or something, like being there at the grocery store, and my mom's like out there with like the petition, and um, and I'm like in the hot sun. I'm kind of like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
But I definitely watched her. She's definitely an inspiration to me. My mom was always like way ahead of the curve. She's always like even before people were aware that water is a really precious resource, like my mom would only take a bath in about like 3 inches of water. And I was like, Mom, why don't you just like relax a little and like
Yeah.
fill up the tub? And she was like, water is a very precious resource. She was like ahead of the curve on recycling, and she was getting bike paths all around where the town where she lived in Boulder, Colorado. And she did research that showed that women at the university were being paid less than their male counterparts.
Mm.
And my mom's research actually led to them starting a new scale that would even out the salaries each year. So my mom was really ahead of the curve. And so I was always inspired by her, but it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do. So I first went to school for theater. I became an actress, and I
Hmm.
worked in theater in Chicago, like with the Steppenwolf Theater Company, and did some independent film. And then after that, I was like, acting is pretty frustrating. You're always sitting by the phone. I didn't like it
Yeah.
so much. So um, I went behind the scenes, and that's when I learned how to edit. I taught myself how to edit actually.
Hmm.
And I actually, then I worked with other editors, and I got a job in network television as an editor. And that was more interesting. I think I liked that a little bit better. And then after that, I had a stint as a rapper for a while, and
Nice. Interesting.
I,
Yeah.
I did like a lot of different stuff. I worked as a documentary filmmaker. I made a documentary that I'm really proud of about why people don't vote and participate in politics. And then after that, I really started doing journalism much more really seriously. And I really, after we did the film about why people don't vote, we during the process of making that film, we really found out more about the problems with the actual voting equipment. I think in 2007, I went to Princeton University and I filmed hackers there. Actually, I think that was the first known hack of a US election system. Now, that's not like they didn't hack an actual election in process, but they got a hold of a US voting machine and they did run programming on it. And then it was like sort of like a research project, right?
Hmm.
Not really hacking an election, a research project by graduate students, but with a real US voting machine.
Hmm.
And I went out to Princeton and I filmed them, and we all voted on the machine. There were three of us, and we all three. There was a little mock election between George Washington and Benedict Arnold, and we all three voted for George Washington. And then they printed out the results of the election, and Benedict Arnold had won. There were two votes for Benedict Arnold and one vote for George Washington. That was the official votes of the machine. And that was because they had run a program on the machine that changed the votes from one candidate to another. So then I became aware, oh, this is a real thing. This can actually happen. And what if this is happening? This is a machine that's actually in use across the whole country. So
Hmm.
I became actually really concerned about it and became a lot more aware. I did a lot of research and investigations. As you said in my intro, some of the investigations I did got, I think to collectively, the investigations I did got over 4 million views.
Wow.
And so I really, I also wrote articles about, problems with the elections. I wrote op-eds in the Hill, but I eventually I came to the feeling that it really wasn't about just in reporting as a journalist and informing the public. I realized that you really needed advocacy, that we really need people who are working with our election officials, elected officials, and the public to actually really change and improve things. And if we don't have people on the ground, we can't just there's a really great place for journalism, but there's also another step further, which is actually making change, actually taking action. And I realized that's where my part was. That's what I need to do right now, is really inform people, but also help them actually create solutions. So I co-founded two nonprofits, actually, one called Smart Elections, and then our action partner called Smart Legislation. And I totally encourage you to go to the websites and check them out and learn more about what we're doing. It's smartelections.us and smartlegislation.org. And through those nonprofits now, we're really trying to teach the public about how to make sure that our process is both inclusive, that everybody who is eligible to vote gets to vote easily and in a convenient way, quick, easy, convenient voting, so that everyone can participate and we can increase participation levels, and also securely and accurately, so that we can make sure that our votes are actually counted accurately. Because at the end of the day, if you vote for a candidate, like say you want me to win, right?
Hmm.
And you vote for me, but the vote actually goes to my opponent, then all the energy that you took into voting for me is wasted. So we
Yeah.
do have to make that extra step that people don't often talk about, and make sure that the votes are counted accurately and correctly. So that's what our nonprofits do now. Did that answer your question? I don't know. It was a
It did. No,
long.
it did. No, it definitely didn't. It definitely did. And I want to go back to this because it's actually a really good topic. I just want to point out something. So obviously, you went through a lot of different things, and you did a lot of different things, and it kind of led to now what you're doing, right? And so I guess my question to you is, if there's a lesson there that you might have learned that people that are listening to us or watching us, what is that lesson, right? Because sometimes people say, well, I want to start working on this particular job, whatever that might be, and they feel like that's going to be their be all type of job for the rest of their lives. Sometimes you got to go through different things to kind of maybe find your passion. I don't know if that's what it was for you, or find the thing that you like. What would be that lesson? I don't know if that's the lesson for you. I know that for some people that might be the lesson, is like you got to seek your passion, even if you have to go through 20, 30 different jobs before you find it, and then stick to it because that's the one thing that's making a difference in your life and people's lives. What was it for you?
I think for me, a lot of it is, how can I be most effective?
Hmm.
That's one really important thing. Is this thing that I'm doing, something that no one else can do? Like, what is like the one true skill that I have that I can bring to the planet in terms of making the planet better, making the world better? And this is what I feel right now is the most important thing for me to do, because there really aren't that many other people doing this.
Right.
So I was like, I enjoyed working in network news. I was an editor with television, and I like editing, and it's creative, and I like putting like, taking the sound bites from people and then finding like music to transition, or like putting the images on that make it like really make the point clear. I love it. But you know what? I wound up feeling like a lot of people could do that. But
Hmm.
is there something like this is something that I don't think anyone else can do. It's a skill that I have because of my life experience, because of the research I've done, because of my communication skills. Like, this is something that only I can do. And then also, I do have a passion for it and I do enjoy it. I think you absolutely have to find something that you love. and
Yeah.
that you do feel creative and vibrant doing.
No, I love that. So now let's go back to what you just mentioned. Like, it could be a little bit alarming for people that are listening to us, and definitely I think people need to be aware and have that truth. If we go back to, the previous presidential elections, and maybe we'll have one coming up next year, right? One of the things that people are wondering is exactly what you just talked about, and is that idea of, there's these machines, and they're doing this, and to an extent, maybe our votes are not being counted the way they should be. Do How does corruption in our government affect us, whether it's at the city level, state level, or presidential level?
Wow. So I got to break that down a little bit because there was
Yeah.
maybe like five different things in that sort of
Yeah.
in that opening. So let's leave corruption to the side for a second and come back to it. And let's just talk about what you talked about at the start of that, which is sort of, are our votes being counted accurately? Because
Hmm.
that's so important. And the fact of the matter is that the US uses more technology in our elections than really almost any other democracy. If you look at the European democracies, most of them are just using a pen and paper and they're counting them by hand in public. There's not really any machines involved. And there's a lot of transparency there. Like if you look at the Netherlands, they have like this one big huge ballot, but they only have to mark one thing. They're not voting for a whole bunch of different candidates. Their elections are much simpler than ours. They just vote for their representative, like in parliament. There and then so they have that one vote, and it's not that hard to count that one vote in public with everybody watching, and it's very transparent. It's harder and more complicated for us in the US because we're like we love democracy so much that we decide we have to vote on everything. So on our ballots, they're very long. There's like your sheriff and your dog catcher. Sometimes like your
Right.
um the undertaker might actually be on the ballot, if you can believe it. And then all the way up, your president, your vice president, your senator, your representative at city council, state representative, right? So we have these long ballots, and it's much harder to count all of those by hand. Um, and so we've developed these machines. So we have technology that counts our votes. And the problem, there's good things and bad things about that. Machines can be very efficient when they're counting, when they're programmed correctly. Machines can also make mistakes, and machines can also be programmed to make
Hmm.
mistakes, called hacking.
Right.
So we have to be very careful when we're using these machines and check them a lot, and that's called audits. And one of the problems right now is that there really are not enough robust audits. Robust means like you do a really good job, right? Like you really do a thorough job. There is not enough robust auditing happening in most of our states. And in fact, there have been estimates by good government groups that only maybe 25% of the audits in the entire country are robust enough to actually catch a problem if a problem occurs. And I'll give you an example of this. So in New Jersey, in 2022, they did have a problem with the voting machines. They were programmed incorrectly. Now, I'm not saying it was a hack. I just think it was a mistake. And they forgot to include a safety programming that they have that lets alerts the election officials if the ballots are being counted twice. They reprogrammed the machines, and they forgot that safety program. So some of the ballots did get run through twice, and they got counted twice. And actually, the wrong candidate got elected in a particular election. And so now they're doing an investigation. They're going back. They're trying to figure out what happened. But they actually did an audit at the time, and that audit didn't actually even catch that the results were wrong. It
Hmm.
got caught because a citizen like you or me just wrote in and did what's called a FOIL, a Freedom of Information law. That's like a public records request where you ask for some documents, and they got the documents and figured out that the numbers were wrong. They could tell because when you add it up, if the ballots get counted twice, then
Hmm.
the numbers aren't going to add up correctly to the number of people who voted and the number of ballots cast. So it was actually an independent citizen, as far as this is what I read, that actually discovered that there was an incorrect count. So this is just to say that we do need to be aware that voting machines make mistakes. And it's not just that one instance. There are actually many, many instances where voting machines make mistakes. There was a issue in DeKalb County where a woman actually came in third, and it turned out she had won. And there were some voting machines that had actually registered 0 for her. And she thought it was odd, and she asked for a recount, and they found out that she had won. And there was a election in 2019 in Pennsylvania, similarly, where the machines just counted wrong and they had to correct it. I could go on for a while, but I don't need to. I think you're getting the point, that sometimes the voting machines don't count correctly. And so we need to make sure that we are doing these audits and checking that the voting machines are counting correctly. And so now the next step in that, in order to be able to do those audits, we have to have voting systems that allow for an audit. And if we have, and election security and auditing experts say the best system to make sure that the audit is meaningful is when you and I both mark our ballot by hand. Like, I don't know, where do you live?
Los Angeles, California. Yeah.
In LA. So in LA, I think you guys have moved to this all touchscreen system. They call it VSAP, Voting Solutions for All People. Is it like you go and you vote on a touchscreen like an ATM?
Yeah, I think the last one, that's exactly what we did, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in 2020 that LA switched over to that system. And there were a lot of problems with that system. I remember you guys had like 3-hour lines and the machines didn't work, and it was very problematic. So one of the things about when you switch to a system where everybody has to vote like on a touch screen, like an ATM style machine, there are a lot of problems that develop from that. One is that you can get very long lines, which we saw in LA. And also auditing experts say that those ballots are less reliable because if, like here in New York right now, we're filling out the ballot with a pen and paper still, if we want. There's also touchscreens available for voters with disabilities. Anybody who wants to use a touchscreen, that machine is available and it's legally required to be available. But we're just saying many voters who are able to in New York can still fill out a ballot with a pen and paper. And the reason why that auditing experts say that's better is because when I'm filling out that ballot with a pen and paper, I'm verifying it at the same time. I see your name, I want to vote for Cesar. And so I put the bubble there next to your name and I'm checking it while I'm doing it. I kind of have to be checking it, right? So we know that that's a verified ballot, that actually has my true intent. If I'm voting for you on a touch screen machine, I'm going to vote for Cesar, and then the ballot's going to print out in the computer. I'm probably not even going to look at this thing. When you get like your ATM receipt, do you look at it?
Not all the time. Nope.
Most people don't.
Right.
And they actually did research. When you go to the grocery store and they give you a receipt, do you look at it?
No.
When you go to like even a restaurant and you sign your Visa card, do you look at it? Most people don't. Right. We trust that the computer's right. But like I showed you, sometimes the computer's wrong. Sometimes the computers make mistakes. So when you have that ballot that's printed out by the computer, auditing experts don't necessarily have confidence that that computer generated ballot has the voter intent. It might not. My vote for Cesar might be there, or the machine might. Sometimes the machines are miscalibrated. Have you ever been on a machine and you press one thing and it doesn't work, or you press it and something else happens?
Yep.
Right. So maybe I tried to vote for Cesar, but actually the vote came up for like, who's somebody that you like, who's your mortal enemy?
I will say a friend of mine, ex-friend of mine, Mark.
Mark? Okay, Mark, sorry about this. So I voted for Cesar, but the ballot actually, the screen was calibrated wrong and the vote actually went to Mark. And so that ballot prints out and now it has an official vote for Mark. It looks like it's official, but it didn't have the vote of your heart. It wasn't actually accurate. So that's why auditing experts don't like these touchscreen computer generated ballots, because nobody's really verifying them. So so I'm sorry, what was the original question? Because I feel like I just want to circle back.
No, you did. So no, we're talking about. There was a couple of different questions, and we're talking right now. We're talking about like the validity of the machines versus doing it. Right.
So we want to know that our votes are accurate, and the way to do that is as many people as possible mark their ballot with a pen and paper. Those who have disabilities or who prefer to mark with touchscreen, of course, we always have to have those machines available. And that mix together will give us ballots that computer and security experts feel they have confidence that we can audit with, and get those votes counted correctly. And so what we do right now, we're working on a couple different things. One is to make sure that as much as we can throughout the country, that we have the voting systems in place that security and auditing experts prefer, right? We want to have the right equipment to start with, and then we want to get the regulations or the laws in place that really require robust audits. And we want to get the public involved to do what we call nonpartisan observation and to look and make sure that all of that is happening, and be, kind of what they call a watchdog group, where you keep an eye on things and make sure that they haven't gone off the rails. So those are kind of our three big actions. We want to make sure that we have the right type of equipment, that voters, all voters, those with and without disabilities, can vote accurately and privately and securely. And then we want to check those votes with audits. And then we want to get the public involved, observing and making sure everything's going well. And then you asked me about corruption.
Yeah.
So the thing about corruption, this is where it comes in, and this is what we're finding in New York. We, like I said, in New York, vote with pen and paper right now, but there are voting machine vendors coming into the state, and they want to sell us these all touchscreen systems that you all have there in LA. Why do they want to do that? Because they're going to make a lot more money. If you can imagine, a pen is like 10 cents, and a voting machine, a touchscreen voting machine, is $10,000. So if most of us can vote with a pen and paper at 10 cents a pop, and some of us vote on a touchscreen, that's $10,000. That's one level of expense. But if everybody has to vote on touchscreen machines, experts estimate that you actually have to buy 5 times more machines. That's $10,000 a machine times 5, $50,000 times all of the different polling stations. We have in Brooklyn alone 9,000 voting machines right now. If you're going to multiply that by 5, now we're going to have 45,000 voting machines to cover Brooklyn, and each one of those is $10,000. That's $450,000. That's almost $500,000 to just cover Brooklyn, and there's 5 boroughs in Brooklyn. So now what are you talking about? You're talking about millions and millions of dollars, and possibly even hundreds of millions of dollars that the government could be wasting if we buy these all touchscreen machines. And it's not necessary. And so we've tried to put a bill through the legislature in order to preserve the pen and paper option. But the lobbyists for the voting machine companies have blocked the bill so far. And that's when you talk about corruption, and how corruption and money are preventing us from making good decisions as a country, as a society.
Yeah, and even with that, I mean, I believe to an extent, there's a lot of people that are a little bit worried and alarmed, with the previous U.S. elections, based on the different elements, and even coming up to the new elections. I have a couple of friends that are very involved too, very similar to you, that have done a lot of investigation, and there's a lot of things happening, and so definitely people are worried that again, are we gonna see? It doesn't really matter who wins. To me, it doesn't really matter. Really, what matters is that the votes are counted accurately. And if people wanted this person, great. If people wanted that person, whatever that might have been, except there shouldn't be any kind of, I guess, corruption or changing votes just to get somebody else's, in office, or in any role for that matter, right? And so I know that a lot of people that I've talked to are kind of worried because of that. And maybe through your research, any particular reason why we haven't, or our government hasn't decided to say, you know what, we're gonna go back on the old-fashioned pen and paper and just do that, because that worked. Although maybe it's a little bit outdated, it definitely worked, right? And it works.
Right. Well, I mean, just think about us in our daily life. Like, I have a computer, but I still have a can with pens right next to my computer, right? I haven't thrown the pens out. Because sometimes if somebody is talking to me on the phone and they're giving me a phone number and I'm like, I need to write this down really quick. So, there's a place for everything. So the main reason why we've been switching, there's 2 reasons why we've been switching to computerized systems. One is because many people with disabilities can vote more conveniently and easily with a computerized system. If I don't have arms, for example, as a friend of mine does not, she, may feel more comfortable voting with a touchscreen system, there are like, maybe there's a rocker paddle, or there's there's a lot of different elements. There's a sip and puff that you can use. So there's ways that computers can be very helpful for voters with disabilities, or someone who has a visual impairment and they want the font blown up really big. That can be tremendously helpful. That's
Mm.
so important. But we don't all need to vote on a touchscreen computer. So, for example, just because some people take the elevator, we don't eliminate
Right.
stairs, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
We
Or
still
vice
have
versa.
stairs.
Right.
And especially like in cases of emergency, they always say, don't take the elevator, take
Right.
the stairs.
Yeah.
So if we're in a situation where the computers all break down, which sometimes happens in voting, the computers break down, or we're going in, into more and more climate change events where we have power outages and the grid goes down. We don't want to be in a situation where all of the voting equipment is computerized. We don't have pen and paper, and we literally like can't vote. In Georgia, where they have all computerized systems, the lines to vote have been as long as 10 hours. 10
Wow.
hour wait times to vote because the computers will break down, or maybe the electronic poll books break down. But then by the time they get those fixed, the line is just so long, they never catch up. You can't recover when you have everybody having to vote on that touchscreen machine. The reason why we keep moving to those all computerized systems primarily is because the vendors make more money, and they push
Mm.
them and they push them and they push them very aggressively. And
Yeah.
they hire lobbyists to stop even legislation when people are trying, to protect the pen and paper option, as we've done here in New York. And I do encourage people to go to smartlegislation.org and find out more about our work specifically in New York and what we're doing to try to protect that pen and paper option here. But so you were saying people are worried about the computerized results. I think the main thing for us to really think about is, how important is our democracy? And is
Mm.
it worth a little bit of your time to try to make sure that where you vote, the votes are going to be counted accurately? And we encourage people not only to vote, it's really important that you register and then you vote, but it's also important, maybe take a little time and get involved in a local group that's doing what we call nonpartisan election observation. And that
Mm.
means you get involved, you talk to your local election officials, and you find out, what type of voting equipment do you have there? Do you have a pen and paper option, or is it all touchscreen? And can you encourage your election officials to go with the pen and paper option? And can you make sure that they're doing an audit that is public and transparent, where you and other people in your community can go down and watch? Are they auditing carefully? Are they doing enough ballots so that you really have confidence? Are they auditing? Sometimes you do what's called a risk limiting audit. That's where you audit a statistical amount. It gets a little bit complicated, but there are, lots of places to find out about risk limiting audits. And you can also just do like a random draw and count like 100% of one precinct or 100% of one race, all by hand in public. And that gives you more confidence that the votes are actually being counted correctly. Some
Yeah.
the more that we do transparent counts that especially are randomly chosen, then we can have confidence that the vote is accurate. And can I talk a little bit about misinformation?
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
I think there's a lot of concern about misinformation, and there is a lot of misinformation. I'm not I'm not
Mhm.
questioning that, especially on this topic. There's a lot of misinformation. But what we want to make sure is that we want to make sure that our fear of misinformation does not prevent us from actually just finding out information, period, about this issue. So, and I'm going to give you sort of a metaphor for this.
Mhm.
So, because I was thinking about this morning, I'm like, what's a good way to explain this? So, take the phrase like, your partner is cheating on you. That's a very loaded phrase, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it creates a lot of fear and anxiety and emotional distress. That phrase could be used accurately and honestly to help someone come to terms with something that's happening, or it could be used in a very deceitful and negative way. So say you have like two couples. I'm going to give you like two examples. And in one case, the partner is not cheating on the other person, and somebody goes to that person and says, your partner is cheating on you, and
Mm.
decimates their marriage, when in fact the partner was not cheating and it was a complete lie and fabrication, and caused a tremendous amount of misery. That's a very bad situation, right? But it
Right.
doesn't mean the phrase, your partner is cheating on you, is the problem. The problem is that it was handled incorrectly, that it was handled abusively and
Mm.
with malice and with deceit. In another instance, say someone knows that their best friend's partner is cheating on them, and they have the evidence and it is actually happening. Maybe it's happening repeatedly, and they go to their friend, and to try to help their friend, they say, honestly, they alert them to that situation. The same phrase, your partner is cheating on you. And in that situation, it's true. And maybe that person wants to know and wants that evidence, and has then more the ability to figure out, what's going on in their own marriage, and to honestly address it. So I think we have to think about information in the same way. The same piece of information can be misused, or it can be used correctly.
Right.
The statement that voting machines are computers and they are hackable, that is just an absolute true statement. Voting machines are computers and they do make mistakes. That is an absolute true statement. Are there groups that have abused that information and used it to frighten people and, stir up trouble where really none needed to be stirred up? Yes. But doesn't mean that we can completely ignore that statement and pretend like everything is perfect and there are no problems with voting machines. No. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
no, definitely, definitely. I mean, and I think that the whole point to this is you have to be able to have that. You got to back up your whatever information you're seeking, right? And just don't go based on that statement, and makes perfect sense. I think like anything, right? We got to make sure that we do our due diligence, and we clearly understand that. As you know, not everything's perfect, and so therefore we got to take it for what it is, with the fact that you have a clear understanding and you back that up with whatever information you have, right? So um let me ask you this, like, actually you talked about how people can support the movement, or what they're doing. How can they support you, or how can they help you?
We would love for people to get involved. So you can reach out to us. You can email us at smartelectionsteam@gmail.com, especially if you want to get involved in nonpartisan election observation. And I actually have a TEDx talk that's supposed to come out soon.
Nice.
Where we talk
Yeah.
especially about nonpartisan election observation. We would like to really be doing this all across the country. And one great thing about US elections is they're local. And you would be
Yeah.
surprised how much impact you can have getting involved in your local elections. And so we want to help people learn about their local elections, give you tools to do that. And if you go to smartelections.us, you can find out more. We have forums, and there's an archive of our forums you can watch and kind of learn more about our process and what we do. And they're also really fun. I have a co-host, Benny Smith, who's hilarious, and he's an election commissioner in Tennessee. And and I think we have a lot of fun, but we also inform people, about the process. So if you want to get involved, go ahead and email me, smartelectionsteam@gmail.com. Or you can, just take a look at the website, come and watch the forums, things like that. And you can also definitely support us financially. It really takes a lot of resources to do this work. We do have a GoFundMe up right now. You can go to tinyurl.com/support voting.
Hmm.
And you can also just go to smartelections.us and do a tax deductible donation there. The GoFundMe is not tax deductible. It helps our work with legislation, but the smartelections.us donation link is tax deductible. And you can also just email us if you have ideas, of a local grant or a national grant that you think would really help us or that we're right for. We are really working to increase our resources right now because we're a little kind of small organization, and
Yeah.
that what they call we're punching above our weight. You know what I mean? We've
Yeah.
had a lot of impact. That video that we produced got 400,000 views. That's a lot for a small organization like we are. But if we could actually get real funding, we could do so much more. So we encourage you to join us, and we encourage you to support us financially.
I love it. I love it. And I was actually going to ask you about that, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. So definitely, we'll have all the information and the show notes. So definitely, this was great. I love the information. We're definitely going to have that video play right before the interview. So when you look at all of this, you're going to have that. Anything else you want to share before I let you go?
Um, I just think that, we all love our families and our communities, and we care about them so deeply. I love my community here in Brooklyn. We have beautiful gardens on the block that we plant flowers and try to take care of each other in the neighborhood. And democracy is about that. It's really just the next step to taking care of ourselves, our families, and our communities, and getting involved and making sure that the decisions that we make together on like these voting systems are accurate, and that they're decisions that help us and our families is so important. So from the bottom of my heart, from my family to yours, I encourage you to get involved.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Faiza, for everything. Definitely love having this conversation with you. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure that you share this message and also tell somebody, because definitely will make a big difference in the upcoming elections and anything that we have going on. So please go out and support. And I'll see you guys at the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Andre Brower. I'm an award-winning actor.
And I'm Laree Daniel Favors, a civil rights attorney and the director of a racial justice law center here in Brooklyn, New York. And we have a message for New York legislators.
There's a crisis in New York, and it could make it hard for our communities to vote. We want to be able to vote with a pen and paper the way we have for years. It's easy and quick and helps our voices to be heard. But powerful vendors are trying to sell us overpriced machines that can contribute to long lines.
Please pass the bill called Viva New York right now. You can learn more at smartlegislation.org. And thanks for all you do.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.